Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, May 20th. The U.S. is applauding Canada's move to ban China's Huawei technologies and ZTE from its next-generation mobile networks. The State Department says it supports efforts around the world to ensure customers can trust their wireless networks and providers. Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne revealed the long-awaited decision yesterday. China quickly released a statement criticizing the move and is accusing Canada of collaborating with the U.S. to hurt Chinese companies. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly has announced a fresh wave of sanctions against Vladimir Putin's regime. This includes a ban on importing Russian vodka, caviar, and diamonds. The ban on the import of luxury goods from Russia covers alcoholic drinks, fish, and seafood. Canada is also banning the export of cigarettes and alcoholic drinks to Russia, along with designer clothing, training shoes, and sportswear. Minister Joly is also imposing sanctions on 14 more people. This is including oligarchs linked with the Putin regime. Back here at home, monkeypox may have spread to British Columbia. Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, says a few dozen people are under investigation for possible infection. While most are in Quebec, there are also a few contacts in British Columbia. There are 2 positive cases in Quebec, and Dr. Tam says health officials expect to hear other confirmations over the next few days. Monkeypox is typically milder, but similar to the now eradicated smallpox virus. It can cause fever, headache, muscle aches, exhaustion, swollen lymph nodes, and lesions all over the body. All right, moving to Alberta now, where Premier Jason Kenney says he will remain in the job until a new United Conservative Party leader is chosen. This decision came just a day after he announced that he was stepping down for the good of his party. Earlier yesterday, some of Mr. Kenney's caucus critics called for him to step down immediately to help heal divisions racking the party. Mr. Kenney announced his departure on Wednesday night after receiving 51% support in a mail-in ballot of party members. Opposition NDP leader Rachel Notley says Mr. Kenney is now officially a caretaker leader, further delaying crucial work on matters that matter to Albertans, such as health care and long wait lists in hospitals. Meantime, Ontario's election campaign is running half virtually and half in person today. This comes as the leaders for the new Democratic and Green parties isolate with COVID-19. NDP leader Andrea Horwath and Green Party leader Mike Schreiner are both campaigning remotely today. Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca is campaigning in Ottawa, and Progressive Conservative leader Doug Ford is continuing to campaign in Niagara. On the West Coast, the Kamloops First Nation says it's planning a new search. The BC First Nations discovery of unmarked graves on the grounds of a former residential school sparked a national reckoning over Canada's treatment of Indigenous peoples. It says in a statement that a new round of ground-penetrating radar probing is to begin this week near the former Kamloops residential school, and it will take about a month to complete. A memorial marking the anniversary of the discovery is planned for Monday. World events continue to impact the Canadian farming industry. Experts say this year's crop could be the most expensive in history for farmers. Fertilizer costs have more than doubled from last year, and diesel and gasoline costs are also soaring. So are the prices for seed, equipment, and herbicides. And it's all driven by inflation, the war in Ukraine, and pandemic-related supply chain challenges. The high cost of inputs means farmers will need to produce good yields and avoid drought and flooding in order to turn a profit. Turning to the East Coast, where Nova Scotia's finance minister is ruling out a cut to gas taxes to help with rising gas prices. Alan McMaster says the revenues from the excise tax and HST on gas are needed to improve the province's roads and highways. Mr. McMaster says the province will provide a package soon for those on income assistance and with lower incomes, which would build on a $13 million assistance package announced in March. The minister says people with higher incomes are more equipped to deal with inflation, which rose to 7.1% in the province in April. 82 members of the Canadian Armed Forces are back on home soil after their ships reached port in Esquimalt, BC yesterday. The Department of National Defense says in a statement that HMCS Saskatoon and Yellowknife were at sea for 147 days. This was part of Operation Carib, a counter-narcotics operation led by the United States Coast Guard. Forum Daily's Energy Update with GasWizard.ca is up next. Up next, Forum Daily's Energy Update with Dan McTeague, who runs the gas price prediction website, GasWizard.ca. Take it away, Dan.
Well, thank you for that, Nima. What a week again, breaking all records across Canada for gasoline prices. Who thought that gasoline was boring or unnecessary or something we could simply wish away? We'll leave that to our federal politicians and the NDP and Liberal and Green and Bloc parties. For now, let's look at what we can expect next week, gas prices. And I'll start this time in the east. Newfoundland has seen a decrease today of 10 cents a litre. The Public Utilities Board there finally agreed that the markets had indeed dropped dramatically. So rather than raising prices as they did on Thursday, they decided to drop them. I suspect that this is probably as good as it's going to get. Unfortunately, like Nova Scotia, which has a regulated market, New Brunswick and PEI, you kind of always have to pay a much higher price until they figure out their synthetic market can work better. It's a real call for the fact that you should abandon regulated prices. There's absolutely no reason for it whatsoever. It's only hurting consumers, not just for gasoline, but for diesel and heating oil. They take too much time in order to reflect what's happening on the markets. And there's predictability. Every second day or every day or so, you can get predictions, not just from myself, but there are others who have decided to copy the work that I've done, and that's a good thing. So as far as Montreal is concerned, Quebec, you're going to be looking at prices this long weekend that will probably go back up from $2.02 up to about $2.06 to $2.08. Toronto, you're looking at prices that have dropped 10 cents a litre, as I had predicted, down to $1.96.9. Today's the last day to take advantage of that, up 4 cents on Saturday, possibly 2 cents on Sunday. So back up and above the $2.04 range, likely for the remainder of the week. For the West, you're looking at a very similar situation, although no change. Prices have gone up and down on the wholesale front. So Winnipeg, Regina, Saskatoon, those two provinces remain at $1.87.9. Same for Alberta, Calgary and Edmonton, 161.9 at the top end. 171.9 at the top end for Calgary and 168 for Calgary. Look for those prices to remain. The only difference is really the retail margin. BC Interior, 201, 203 for Prince George, for Kelowna, for Kamloops. Look for those to drop about 6 or 7 cents a litre, down to about the mid $1.90 range. Vancouver, you saw a bit of a break down from the record of any city in North America of 233.9, dropped to 214.9, now back up to 220.9, and you're probably going to be about 225 for the remainder of the week. Important to know, while Canada's going into the long weekend, the kickoff of its summer driving season, and many people, despite these prices, will still have to drive, it's the United States that begins next week. That's when we will start to see gas prices go even higher. Although diesel we may be getting a bit of a break on diesel as refineries try to reconfigure their output to produce more of that diesel, which is in very, very short supply and very high demand. We're going to see gasoline prices impacted by that. China as well, coming back online after its 17th, 18th, 19th, 2007 wave. We're likely to see more pressure on oil. This is the time of year where gasoline prices detach from oil. So looking at oil and saying, hey, prices didn't move for oil, how come gas prices are going up? You have to look at the gasoline market itself, and that's going to be a pretty big impact going forward. I suspect that average prices in Canada by this time next week, Friday, the end of last week of May, will likely lead to an across-the-board increase of about 5 cents a litre. So it doesn't really matter where you are in the country. You will see prices move back up, possibly to records that we saw on Sunday to Wednesday, when we saw 209.9, for instance, in Toronto, Ottawa, Hamilton, London, and all those major places. At the same time, federal government doesn't seem to be willing to rebate the billions of dollars it's raking in on the GST applied to the additional 80 cents a litre year over year. And it's not lost on folks like myself that food prices and every other commodity we have are badly impacted by a government that wants to double down, triple down on its green energy policy. policies. A complete failure in Europe, walked into Putin's hands. Canada could do more, sell more oil to the rest of the world, drop oil prices, increase the value of the Canadian dollar, save you and I 50 cents a litre. But that's just not something this federal government wants to acknowledge. Sooner or later, consumers are going to have to speak up, and they're going to have to speak very loudly. Nima, that's it for this week. We'll talk next week. Have a great long weekend.
Lots to consider, Dan. That was Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy and the operator of GasWizard.ca. Well, as you mentioned, Dan, gasoline prices in Canada have declined slightly just before the start of the May long weekend. Fuel prices tracking service GasBuddy.com says the average retail price at the pumps across Canada this morning was $1.99 per litre. Stay with us. We'll be right back shortly on Forum Daily. Welcome back. Up next, Forum Daily's weekly crypto and digital asset update with Catherine Murray, the host of The Buck Stops Here. All yours, Catherine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to your weekly crypto and digital asset update. I'm Catherine Murray. Well, we have seen dramatic declines in cryptocurrencies alongside the equity market capitulation this week on rising rate fears to combat inflation. We've seen investors fleeing risk assets, including digital assets, but we also have to remember that this is still very much an emerging asset class. Now, at the same time, it's worth mentioning crypto has seen an increase in correlation with the equity markets and stand at about 0.67 to 0.78, more than triple the correlation we saw back in 2019 and 2021. Why is this important? Because investors really like the uncorrelated aspect of the asset and maybe bought it as a bit of a hedge against traditional assets. Interestingly, some say that the reason for the increased correlation with the bond and equity markets is because more hedge funds and traditional money managers are actually becoming more active in the space. The drawdown is causing Swiss wealth manager Julius Baer to perhaps see an opportunity and move into the space, offering crypto services to his clients, with the CEO saying it has a transformative potential. We've also seen Goldman Sachs alongside Barclays and some venture capital firms announce a $70 million Series A round for Elwood Technologies, which is a trading platform that helps institutions access crypto markets. So there's no stopping there. We've also been reporting on the global uptake of crypto and digital assets by countries and companies around the world. Add to the list Brazil. B3, the Brazilian stock exchange, will begin trading Bitcoin futures within 3 to 6 months. And in the corporate news front, Shopify is expanding their crypto payment options with Crypto.com as another way for accepting crypto payments. Shop CEO John Lee said our growing blockchain ecosystem demonstrates their commitment to supporting merchants with alternative payment methods. And as a bonus, Shop merchants using Crypto.com will not pay settlement fees for 1 month. And we certainly do continue to see the crossover of crypto into the traditional asset classes, this time the $100 trillion bond market. Babel Financial announced Thursday it has issued its first collateralized USDC note. It's a smart contract-based global debt instrument provided by blockchain startup FQX. So as I understand it, a blockchain-based debt instrument that can be used globally for a variety of financing purposes. Why is this important, or why and what do we think it means? It seems to demonstrate FQX's proof of concept of a move towards decentralizing finance, which recall, going back to the very beginning of Bitcoin, is what crypto was kind of all about and digital assets are all about, moving away from government and central banks' control of currencies as well as interest rates. Speaking of which, I do want to just address the market downdraft that we've seen this week with the Dow down over 1,100 points in one day, obviously on concerns that we are seeing inflation and what will the U.S. Federal Reserve do about it? How aggressive will they be? If they are in fact aggressive, they will end up perhaps putting additional downward pressure on valuations within the stock market. Interestingly, Wall Street Journal points out that a handful of stocks are responsible for 46% of the S&P 500 2022 losses through Wednesday of this week. So again, it's really the high valuation tech stocks that we are seeing really put some downward pressure on the overall market. Having said all of this, though, I would also point out that we are seeing diverging views of central bankers. The reason why we actually saw a bit of a pop in the market to start today on Friday was because China decreased their rates. You've got two of the largest world economies and having different central bank policies, the US raising rates, China lowering rates, the US trying to combat inflation, China trying to grow growth. So we've got to watch what that might mean in terms of how that impacts our markets. I will, however, say that with the US Federal Reserve, it is possible with so much focus on inflation, they might also start focusing on financial stability. We've got a rising US dollar, which is very, very painful for emerging markets, which in fact could cause financial instability. This is an out of consensus call, but there could be a bit of a point where the US Federal Reserve has to also look at the pain that the strong US dollar is causing on other markets, the financial instability that that could cause, and therefore maybe they won't be as aggressive. Nima, back to you.
Thanks for that, Catherine. Lots to watch for. For more analysis and news on the financial markets, be sure to tune in to Catherine Murray on The Buck Stops Here. All right, stay with us. After the break, we'll take a look at major news happening around the world. We'll be right back on Forum Daily. Russia says more than 1,900 Ukrainian fighters have surrendered so far from the steel plant in Mariupol. Now, that is up by about 200 from Moscow's previous estimate. Meanwhile, Russia also claims to have taken full control of Mariupol in what would be its biggest victory yet. However, there has been no immediate confirmation from Ukraine. All right, well, meanwhile, the group of 7 leading economies has agreed to provide $19.8 billion in economic aid to Ukraine. The pledge is aimed at ensuring Ukraine's finances do not hinder its ability to defend itself from Russia's invasion. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is in Germany for talks with her G7 counterparts, and she says support from the bloc is crucial to ensure the country has the support it needs to win. Ms. Freeland also announced a separate loan of $250 million through the IMF. Well, all of this comes as the state-owned energy company in Finland says Russia will cut off natural gas to the Nordic country after it refused Mr. Putin's demand to pay in rubles. Finland is the latest country to be cut off after refusing Russia's decree, which is aimed at bolstering the ruble to help offset sanctions imposed after the invasion of Ukraine. Poland and Bulgaria were cut off late last month, while Italy's energy company says it is starting procedures to follow the demand. Finnish broadcaster YLE says natural gas accounted for just 6% of Finland's total energy consumption in 2020. This is compared to 40% for Italy and 35% for Germany. Finland and Sweden's bid to join NATO is meeting stiff opposition from Turkey's president, who says he's engaged in what he calls telephone diplomacy over the applications. Recep Tayyip Erdogan says his country is determined not to approve membership for the 2 Nordic countries, which Turkey accuses of supporting terror organizations. He told reporters today that he spoke to the Netherlands Prime Minister and will hold further talks with British and Finnish leaders. All 30 NATO member countries must approve the entry of new members. Moving to the U.S. now, where President Joe Biden has opened a trip to Asia with a tour of a South Korean computer chip factory. It will be the model for another plant in Texas. Mr. Biden is hoping to deepen American ties with the Indo-Pacific, fueling technological innovation and fostering vibrant democracies. The message is pitched toward the promise of a better tomorrow, but also at U.S. voters. Mr. Biden faces a number of political challenges at home, including inflation that's been driven higher by a chip shortage. The UN is warning that 18 million people in Africa's Sahel region will face severe hunger in the next 3 months. 2 UN agencies are citing the impacts of war in Ukraine, the coronavirus pandemic, climate-induced shocks, and rising costs. They say people may try to migrate out of the affected areas. The UN says 4 countries, Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, and Niger, are facing alarming levels. OCHA is releasing $30 million from its emergency fund to help respond to the looming crisis. All right, well, meanwhile, Burkina Faso's government says jihadis have targeted a military base in the country's east, killing at least 11 soldiers and injuring nearly 24. For 6 years, the West African country has been ravaged by violence linked to al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group. It has killed thousands and displaced nearly 2 million people. Mutinous soldiers ousted the democratically elected president in January, promising to stem the violence. But since then, attacks have increased. The European Union's law enforcement agency indicates authorities in 6 countries have taken a huge step in the fight against online extremism. They worked with music streaming service Soundcloud to detect and delete hundreds of files containing extremist propaganda. Europol said the content that was flagged included jihadist chants in several languages and audio promoting right-wing extremist groups. Some of the material had already gathered several thousand hits. Well, it took a village, or at least a strong community effort, to help 7 stranded dolphins get back into deeper waters. The dolphins got stranded on Wednesday in a shallow part of the Herring River on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. But their fate changed for the better thanks to the work of more than 40 experts, interns, and volunteers. The International Fund for Animal Welfare says the team had to work quickly to help the dolphins. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily.